Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rettig, good to see you. Thank you for the visit to my office. The IRS has a history from bygone days of having been used as a political weapon. We have a president who apparently is regularly demanding loyalty of folks who are appointed. We witness the administration leaning on both independent regulators and on agencies of government like DOJ that are supposed to be independent to try to impose their will. That combination of factors raises the question of how, A, have you made any loyalty pledge or been asked to make any loyalty pledge? No, you have not?
Excuse me. No on both counts.
No on both counts. And along the spectrum of yielding to political pressure when it's brought to bear on you versus being staunchly independent as commissioner, where do you expect you would fall along that spectrum?
I would hope that the members of this committee and the American taxpayers see me as staunchly independent or more so.
One of the problems we talked about in my office is the problem of shell corporations. They're used for tax avoidance and evasion. They're also used for a considerable degree of criminal activity. Much of that is a matter of state law, but there are signals that the IRS commissioner can send by, for instance, telling investigators looking into tax fraud that when they bump up against a shell corporation, they ought to really redouble their efforts and not just walk away because we can't figure that out. And also to be a voice with respect to the shell corporation problem as Congress deliberates that problem. Let me know what your thoughts are on dealing with shell corporations in those two ways.
If confirmed, I will be a vocal advocate for the strength of the enforcement mechanisms of the Internal Revenue Service, including the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. And in my background, criminal investigation does not back down from a challenge. They appreciate the challenge and they move forward.
And would you be willing to make a report to us once you've been in for a while and gotten a look at this as to how bad the shell corporation's problem is from your perspective in terms of law enforcement?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. There is a collections gap between what taxpayers owe and what the IRS collects that's estimated to be about $400 billion. Would it be fair for us to evaluate your tenure as IRS commissioner based on what you can do to reduce that number?
Senator, what I can tell you is I'm very familiar with the tax gap. I'm familiar with the majority of the tax gap comes from the individual side, underreporting, non-filing, and underpayment. And I actually look at the tax gap as somewhat of a roadmap to tax avoidance, tax evasion in this country. It has been identified going back to 2001, I believe was the first tax gap map that was created, dealing with tax year 2001. I'm very sensitive to that issue, and I'm sensitive to the need to reduce that issue. Variety of reasons, including a little bit more respect. If we got 1% more of voluntary compliance, we move it from, say, 83% to 84%. That's another $30 billion a year. And on the other side, if the Internal Revenue Service loses respect of the American taxpayer and it reduces 1%, that's a $30 billion a year loss. I'm extremely hopeful to put a significant dent in the tax gap.
And my last question is that a lot of the work that the IRS does is based on truthful reporting by taxpayers. If it should come to your attention that a taxpayer is claiming one thing under oath in a filing to the IRS and is claiming something that on its face appears very different to other regulators or in other reporting environments, what do you think should be done about that? Is that worth at least a preliminary look to see why the taxpayer is reporting something very different to the IRS than they are elsewhere?
The commissioner is not not responsible for audit selection of taxpayers or issues, that's really more the workforce. But I think that the IRS itself has those mechanisms in place, and they do read the newspapers, they do pay attention to what's going on outside of the service.
Should it be something the IRS looks into if there appears to be inconsistent reporting to determine whether the reporting to the IRS is truthful or not?
In my experience, the IRS has looked into that.
And should it continue to do so?
I believe that they should.
Okay.
It's been my experience that they do.
My time is up. I thank the chairman.